Today we are doing a Standard Granblue deck profile, and yes, the premium one is also coming up. I'm really excited for that one. I'm really proud of that list. Quick shout out to Zero Damage Gaming. The new mat is available right now. You'll love it. Use the code Solemn to get, I believe, 10% off, so that's pretty dope. Go check that out. Link in the description. Let's get into the profile. So obviously, Granblue Standard, we got the new boss, Cocytus. What an epic card. I honestly prefer it over Baskirk as far as art goes, but its effect is also just much better. It's basically power creeped Baskirk. However, we are still running Baskirk. We'll get to that. For Cocytus, he's amazing. He's such a hard plus. The only issue and the only thing keeping this deck balanced is his mill. So the 4 mill in the beginning of the game, you're like, whoa, I'm setting up that drop zone. That's so amazing. But then, after a while, you will just deck out because that 4, it just starts counting. And so this makes us pretty weak to decks that can last long. Something like Angel Feather, our only out is Violence Flanger and hitting crits on the Flanger. So that's pretty painful. But overall, most matchups we just annihilate. Like Bermuda Triangle, you just annihilate them. You have endless PGs, you have endless advantage, and they just die unless they sack. This deck is really good. Really, really good. I don't think it's possible for it to die. The only thing you die to is yourself. You mill so much, and so after a while, you gotta stop milling and calling because you will just, you will deck out. If that wasn't the case, I don't think any deck could kill this deck. So 4, obviously, you have to ride it ASAP, and you want to re-ride it as much as possible to really milk all the power out of it. Then we run 2 Skull Dragon. He's been with us ever since the beginning of V-Series, essentially. He's just a massive beater. He gets bigger and bigger and bigger and just scales into ridiculousness. He gets bigger than all the Bermuda shit, so it's just very exciting, this card. Now, we can't run more because riding him kind of sucks. We really need that graveyard recursion, and we don't have that. So 2 is fine. You will see it often enough. So luckily, we also have the grade 2 ship now. So now we have plenty of good targets at the beginning. And then on turn 4 or so, he will always be in drop zone anyway. So 2 is a good number right here. Then we have 2 Flanger. 2 is correct. Running anything less is totally wrong, and you're shooting yourself in the foot. I played this deck in the shop challenge, and literally my only losses it was always best of 3, by the way. My only losses was literally my Flanger in damage zone. If he's not in damage zone, you are basically gonna win. This deck is really, really strong, but Flanger is your singular win con. He's the only thing that can out someone sacking into all their PGs and basically saying, oh, Skull Dragon, I don't care. This card gets around that, and as I said, your hand is so gigantic, you can easily do this. You can do this turn after turn if you want, as long as you have the grade 3 in Soul, of course. So this card is just really, really nutty. You need to run 2. I only ran 1 in that shop challenge, and I think that's basically the only reason I didn't win it, because when you see him, your match becomes pretty free, if they're at 5 damage, of course. Then we run 1 Scare Deck. This is the worst card in the deck. Like, every single time I was like, oh, I'm gonna play this Scare Deck now, and I was, I actually wish I had a Flanger, but Flanger is in damage, so rip me. You really need to run 2. Seriously, run 2. Not 1, 2. So I ran 2 Scare Deck and 1 Flanger. Dumbest move of my life. I didn't really test the list before the challenge, so it's kind of my fault right there. But 1, like, it's really cool to be able to go, oh, they just healed, and now I have my Cocytus, and I have this one, and then I have my Flanger, so hopefully I hit a crit, and then all 3 of my lines hit for lethal. That's cool, so it has its place. It's kind of like Bermuda Melody, where all their lines are potentially lethal even if you're at 4. So you run it for that reason, and you also have access to it anyway, but more than 1 is kind of overkill in my opinion. I don't think, I mean, I've had games where I had 2, but it really didn't matter. So Skull Dragon is generally better throughout the game, and at the end Flanger is better, so it's there for a niche situation, but generally 2 is a bit overkill. Then we have 1 Baskirk. Now, when we first saw Cocytus, people were like, oh, goodbye Baskirk, what a shit card now, Here's the issue. If you actually tested this deck at all, you would know that you actually still play Baskirk. The reason is, as I said, after a while you start decking out and you are unable to use Cocytus. So in the grind matchup, in the Angel Feathers or the other Protect matchups where you literally won't be winning quickly, meaning you will deck yourself out and they will just outlast you, it is very, very useful to suddenly be able to go, I ride Baskirk, and now for 2 turns, I can just keep on playing anyway, even with super low deck. He's still really, really important, just knowing that you won't be decking out, and you're still getting that one call, you know, so you're still going to be able to recur a Skull Dragon or something like that, and we are also running Captain Nightmist. So once we start getting close to deck out, being able to go ride Baskirk, call Captain Nightmist, and basically get the same amount of pressure as you would have on a Cocytus is really, really good. So this is kind of like a ceiling increase, and we only run one because you can get it off Greed Shade, and you can also just keep it in hand. So if you see it earlier in the game, you just know, okay, I'm gonna hold on to this, and I know it will get useful later on in the game. This just gives you that flexibility. And Granblue has access to their whole deck basically always, because of how fast they mill and how you can get everything back basically, that it really doesn't hurt to run 1-offs and 2-offs in this deck. So this is correct. You need to run one Baskirk. Also, a little argument is like, oh, it's one more card that's a good ride. Because riding Flanger or riding Scaredick or riding Skull Dragon is the worst thing ever. Being able to ride this is at least better. Some people say, oh, if you ride the Baskirk, you're losing anyway. Like, no, you're not. We draw endless. We are literally unkillable. You cannot kill Granblue. Granblue only kills itself. Next up, the best card ever printed in V-Series for Greed Shade. Not only just for Granblue, like this is just the best card. Argument is over. This card, I think in the future will become ridiculous unless the game becomes so damn fast that you have to win like this. Sure, then he becomes bad because he's like a little slower. You're digging for answers, and if the game becomes so fast that digging for answers is too slow, okay. But any other point ever, this card is insanity. Being able to grab literally anything you want from your drop zone is so good. And the only reason this card by itself doesn't catapult Granblue into best deck in format in both formats is because the rest of their card pool isn't as good. This card is stupid. Being able to go, let's say you're against Melody, right? You know they have only 3 attacks ever, unless they have Highlander build, but they don't. They only have 3 attacks. Being able to just get PGs to hand of this guy is super dumb. You rewrite your Cocytus, get a Protect marker, you call this off your Cocytus, maybe even in the back row, because Skull Dragon is going to be stupid big anyway. And then you just get PGs to hand, you discard some of your grade 3s or your Ghost Chip or stupid shit like that anyway, and then you get PGs and you survive literally anything. Or, if you are in a matchup where the PG doesn't matter, maybe you're going up against an Excel and the 1 Protect marker is enough to stop their Vanguard, then you just go, okay, I discard this garbage 5k shield, get a heal back to hand, and once again, you survive anything. You are going up against Waterfall or Shadow Paladin, start discarding those PGs to get heals to hand, and literally this card is so dumb. Beyond that, again, if you are in a game where you need to rewrite Baskirk for the long game, you have access to that now. Need access to, let's say, a Violence Flanger or a Scaredick without using your Cocytus skill. These can be called from hand, so you can use your Greed Shade to have access to these. Now, this is 2 mills, so you kind of have to have like some foresight to be able to notice if you'll need them later, so that's what also makes this deck kind of interesting to play in Standard. There's a few more things you have to consider. This card gives you outs to literally anything, and also sets up your drop in the early game, and also makes your ride target better. I could make a 1-hour video about why this is the best card ever printed, but you do not run less than 4. This card is the heart and soul of the deck. I mean, the second it was shown, I already went nuts with the reveal video. This card is so good. I could keep on going on. Like, Christ, this card. 4. That's all. 4. Then we run 3 Night Mist. Now, I know some people cut him. That's wrong. No, I can see arguments, but they're still wrong. So, Ruin Shade is the other option, right, in this slot. And the issue with Ruin Shade is that he sets up drop and it's amazing on your grade 3 ride, but any point beyond that, you are now doomed. Because if you use your Ruin Shade on turn 2, that also means that your turn 5 doesn't exist because you're gonna die of deck out. If you went double Ruin Shade, which is like really fun, okay, once again, you're gonna die of deck out. And the thing is, Ruin Shade does hit over 10k, which is great in the Force matchup, but here's a newsflash, you don't die to Force, ever. It's impossible, unless they sack real hard. What Captain Nightmist allows you to do is play the early game if you saw Ripple Banshee, or, more importantly, if you are too close to deck out to use Cocytus to get any calls, Captain Nightmist still gives you calls. So Captain Nightmist is basically an oh shit button to still call Skull Dragons in the turn where you're no longer able to use Cocytus. Yes, I keep using this specific situation, this specific issue that arises, because it's literally the only weakness the deck has. If this deck couldn't deck out, this would be tier 0. It is impossible to kill any other way. Like I said, the only reason a Granblue deck dies is because they had to stop drawing because they would deck out. That's how crazy this deck is. So we run this to mitigate that issue. So in the early game, cool, we can use it to Ripple Banshee to do some extra attacks to actually plus. And in the late game, it's just an oh shit button. Really, really good card. Especially if we reroll into Baskirk and also have this into hand, we can use 2 CB to automatically do 2 calls and probably end the game right there. So it depends on if you have the CB for it, but very often you do, because this deck doesn't use CB beyond its calls. Then we have 3 Ship. This card is really, really good. It's like a Saber Flow Sailor that also gets real, real big. And since this deck recurs it, it's just very beautiful. Usually you use it on your turn 3, sometimes turn 4, to try and draw at a point where Skull Dragon wouldn't get that big anyway. Like, sure, you may have a difference of 5k, maybe maximum difference of 10k on turn 3 or 4, but being able to draw so you don't die against your opponent is really, really good. And then you know, okay, next turn I'm killing them anyway, so nothing matters. I like 3 because that way you see it on those earlier turns. If you only run 2, it's actually very likely that you just don't see it. And as I said, in the later game, you're very close to deck out, and Skull Dragon is huge, so you never want to use this over Skull Dragon in those very late turns. For grade 1s, we have 4 Romario, still the best ride target, especially if you are able to put in like a Scaredick or a Skull Dragon into the soul, so that your very first Kokaidos already calls 3, that's really strong. That is like the best thing ever. So being able to ride it, very important as a 4-off. Then we have 4 Ripple Banshee. Amazing card, especially in Standard. Just being able to call this of a Kokaidos if your front row has already been filled. Like, let's say you have 3 calls, your front is going to be something like Skull Dragon, the Ship, and then one more call, and that one more call just pluses you. Why not, right? It also gets stuff out of soul, so that's one more thing that actually increases your drop zone count without decreasing your deck count. So getting that soul empty is actually very strong, and this is basically the only card that does it. Basker can do it too, but ideally you are at Kokaidos in the earlier stages of the game. So being able to empty that soul, maybe have some good pieces because of that, is very, very nice. As I said as well, in the early game, let's say you guarded their first turn with a Ripple Banshee to then go Captain Nightmist, call this back, draw. Like, that's a very, very strong move you can do right there. And if you can push that damage earlier, that also means that your turn 3 and 4 on your Kokaidos is way more lethal, because they're 1 damage further, basically, which allows you to then not have a long game. And you don't want a long game, because that's where you deck out. Also, this behind the Captain Nightmist is a 21k column, so isn't stopped by a singular defensive trigger against force numbers. So that's very nice as well. I think 4 is definitely correct, especially because your back row sticks. Meaning on grade 3 turn, if you call stuff with Kokaidos, like you have Ship, Skull Dragon, a grade 1 that you called, like this one, it doesn't vanish. The Skull Dragon and the Ship will die, so next turn you get to recall them with Kokaidos, but this stays. So if you called, let's say you only ran 2, right? You called 1, this one is stuck now. So now you're hoping to find the next one just so you can plus on turn 4 again, and so forth. So being able to run higher numbers so that you don't run out because they stick to the board, and you don't want to overcall them because then you're minusing. So that's like very counterproductive. Running 4 is very correct for that reason. We're running 4 Ghosty Boy. If you are going to be riding not Romario, this is the second best ride. You want to be able to ditch your Skull Dragon, ditch your Ghost Ship as fast as possible, and get something more useful that you can use, like a Greed Shade, for example, or your right target Kokaidos. Also fills the drop zone already. Stuff like Skull Dragon and Ghost Ship you can't actually guard with, so they are pretty sticky. The only way you can get rid of them is by PGing with them. Some people want to decrease these numbers to 3 or to 2. That is wrong, for the reason that the best decks right now are Force, and if Force is going first, you did not get the chance to get your PG to hand yet, your Protect marker, because you didn't ride 3. They rode 3. They're gonna kill you right now, especially if there's something like Bermuda who just pops off with the Force marker on the Vanguard, the Force 2, you know, the extra crits, and you just die. So being able to have a PG ready at that specific moment is really strong, really important. And then if you live through that first grade 3 turn of them, you basically win the game. So if you cut the numbers of this, you will be losing games of Force going first. And when Force is the best deck in the format, or well, a few Force decks are the best decks in the format, that's very, very dumb. So 4 right now is the move. Once we see Excel becoming best, that's when we can start cutting 1 or maybe even 2, depending on how far we actually tilt. For now, 4 because Bermuda is a thing, Dimension Police is a thing, and so forth. Now do note, if Dimension Police is playing Glory Maker, this is very, very bad for us. But that also means that they're using CB on it on turn 3. And since a lot of our swings are actually 2 crit, we can kind of damage deny them to a certain extent. Also, because of Greed Shade, we can actually start discarding random stuff to get heals to hand. And that makes quite some stuff way easier to guard as well. So for now, 4 is correct, especially as long as Bermuda is the force to be reckoned with. Whoa, badoomts. Then we are running 1 Troubadour Alfio, or whatever they changed his name into. This is for if people are damage denying us, we are unable to use Kokaidos and basically our whole engine shuts down. So then being able to go, okay, Troubadour, get my CB back. Now I use it for Kokaidos and GG. That's really, really handy. Since we have Greed Shade, we always have access to this card anyway. You can always go Greed Shade, get it to hand, and now I can do my thing. So that's very, very nice. The one-off, there's no better card. I see some people running Dragon Spirit, the grade 1, which makes better numbers. I can agree with that. If you find room for the Dragon Spirit by maybe decreasing a grade 2 or maybe cutting 1 Ripple Banshee, I can see that. I don't like it, but it's valid, I would say. But 1 Troubadour Alfie is pretty important for when people try to be big brain and then just get completely knocked out because Greed Shade always has access to all the cards ever. Lastly, we have 12 crits because this deck can do that. Like, not many decks are able to just play 12 crits and not die because the draw PGs are very, very strong, obviously. But this deck will literally deck out because of it. And you have endless PGs, you have endless draws, so it's really not something you have to be concerned with. And crits make it so they're closer to 5 or even 4, at which point Flanger just ends the game. So 12 is definitely correct. You shouldn't be trying to experiment with draw PGs and all that kind of crap. It's really not worth it. Granblue, historically, has always been running 12 crit before G and stuff like that for a very good reason, and it just works. Then we have our 4 heals, and we also have our Captain Knight Git because he's much cuter than Guiding Zombie. I hope we can all agree on that. So that is the deck profile. I'm actually having quite some fun playing this deck in Standard. Overall, a lot of decks always feel very stale. They're very do one singular thing, and if it doesn't work, well, okay, hope you sack. It all feels pretty stale, but this deck has like quite some things you can do. It's actually really fun. Do note, my premium version of Granblue is coming out very soon as well. I'm really excited for that one. I love that deck. Like, this is probably my favorite Standard deck to play, and it's probably my second favorite or maybe even favorite deck to play in Premium as well. Just a really, really fun clan right now. As I said before, Zero Damage Gaming, the new playmat, you can go grab that in the link in the description. Let me know your thoughts in the comments down below, and I will see you soon. Ciao.